Homeless human boy pays alien strangers boost fare, unaware he's a rich diplomat. The Nexus transit hub buzzed with alien life, a cacophony of chittering mandibles, rumbling baritones, and the occasional high-pitched whine of a Galician infant. 12-year-old Max huddled in his usual corner, pulling his tattered coat tighter against the artificial chill of the station. The coat, 3 sizes too large and patched in 17 different places, was his most valuable possession beside the small pouch of coins tucked inside his sock. Max watched the crowds with practiced eyes. He knew every species that frequented this part of Harmony City. The bulky Taurans, with their 4 arms perfect for carrying shopping bags, the translucent Medusans, who floated rather than walked, and the occasional human diplomat, always flanked by security. Humans were rare here in the outer colonies, especially since the Galactic Accord restricted Earth's expansion after the resource wars. "Just another day in paradise," Max muttered, running a hand through his short, dirty hair. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday's half-finished protein bar scavenged from a trash receptacle. The coins in his sock represented 3 weeks of careful scavenging, odd jobs, and occasionally distracting merchants, while other street kids pilfered fruit from stalls. Not that he was proud of that last bit, but hunger had a way of reshaping morality. Max's attention shifted to the arrival platform where a sleek transit pod had just docked. Among the disembarking passengers was an elderly humanoid alien whose bright blue skin caught the artificial lighting. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with long, elegant limbs and a posture that suggested importance despite his apparent age. His dark green suit with intricate silver patterns along the lapels looked expensive, the kind worn by diplomats or corporate executives. The blue-skinned alien approached the transfer gate, reaching into his pocket with a confident gesture that suddenly faltered. His long fingers patted various pockets with increasing urgency. "I seem to have misplaced my credit chip," the alien explained to the Tauran transit officer, his voice melodious despite the obvious distress. "I am Counselor Aridin of the Cerulean Diplomatic Corps. Perhaps you could verify my identity through the central database?" The Tauran officer's forearms crossed simultaneously, never a good sign. No ticket, no ride. That's policy, even for diplomats. The way he emphasized the last word made it clear he didn't believe the blue alien. "This is preposterous," Aridin protested. "I have an urgent meeting with the colonial governor. The future of 3-star systems could depend on my arrival." A few nearby passengers snickered. A Galician with mandibles that clicked when he laughed muttered something about blue skins always thinking they're special. "Back of the line, Gramps," growled a burly Martian colonist, shoving past Aridin and slapping his transit pass against the scanner. Max watched as the elderly alien stumbled, nearly falling before catching himself on a handrail. Something about the dignified way the alien straightened his suit, despite the humiliation, struck a chord with Max. Before he could reconsider, Max was on his feet, weaving through the crowd toward the gate. His hand slipped into his sock, retrieving the small cloth pouch that contained everything he had in the world. "Sir," Max said, approaching Aridin with his eyes downcast, as he'd learned to do when addressing adults. "Take this. It's all I have, but you need it more." Max held out his hand, coins gleaming under the harsh station lights. The blue alien's large pupilless eyes widened in surprise. "Child, I couldn't possibly—" "Please," Max insisted. "I know what it's like when nobody believes you." Aridin studied Max for a long moment, then gently accepted the offering with long blue fingers. "What is your name, young human?" "Maximum Just Max." "Well, just Max," Aridin said with a slight bow that seemed oddly formal. "I shall not forget this kindness. A debt incurred is a debt that must be repaid." Max shrugged, already backing away. "It's just bus fare." As Max retreated to his corner, he watched Aridin purchase a ticket and board the next transit pod. The alien turned once, those strange eyes finding Max in the crowd, before disappearing inside. Max slumped against the wall, suddenly aware that he had just given away everything he had. No dinner tonight, no breakfast tomorrow, no saving up for a new coat before winter set in. "Stupid," he muttered to himself. "Really stupid." But despite the hunger and the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, Max felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. pride. For just a moment, he hadn't been a street rat or an orphan or that human boy. He'd been someone who could help. As the transit pod hummed away, carrying the strange blue alien to whatever important meeting awaited him, Max closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to have a home. 3 days after giving away his savings, Max was back to his usual routine, scavenging, hiding, and trying to stay alive. His stomach had become a constant companion in conversation, grumbling and protesting at every turn. He'd managed to find half an uneaten protein bar in a waste receptacle yesterday, but today's prospects looked grim. The Nexus Transit Hub remained his best hope for finding food. Travelers often discarded perfectly edible items in their rush to catch connections, and the cleaning drones couldn't get everything. Max slipped through the crowd with practiced ease. Humans might be rare in the outer colonies, but his small size and quick movements made him nearly invisible among the bustling aliens. He spotted a promising target, a distracted Arcturian businessman juggling 3 bags and a drink container. Just as Max positioned himself to catch whatever might fall, a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Got you, little thief," growled a voice that seemed to originate from somewhere deep underground. Max looked up into the four-eyed face of a Proximan security officer. The alien's mottled gray skin stretched tight across a face that seemed designed for intimidation rather than friendliness. "I didn't take anything," Max protested, trying to wriggle free. The security officer's grip tightened. "We've had reports of a human child pickpocketing travelers. 3 complaints in the last week." "Wasn't me," Max insisted, though he knew how this would end. His word against theirs, and humans weren't exactly trusted in this part of space. A small crowd began to gather. Max recognized the gleam in their eyes, the satisfaction of seeing justice served, especially to a human. Since the resource wars, many species viewed humans as greedy, violent expansionists who had been rightfully put in their place by the Galactic Accord. "Check his pockets," suggested a Tauran bystander. The security officer's free hand began patting Max down roughly. "Empty your pockets, human." "I don't have anything." Max's voice cracked with a mixture of fear and indignation. "I gave everything I had to." "A likely story," interrupted the officer. "You'll be spending some quality time in juvenile detention. Maybe they can teach you some respect for—" The officer's words died in his throat as the crowd around them suddenly parted. The ambient noise of the transit hub dropped to a murmur, then to silence. A procession of vehicles had pulled up outside the main entrance, sleek black transports with diplomatic insignia that even Max recognized. Uniformed guards with ceremonial staffs formed a perimeter as the central vehicle's door slid open. Counselor Eridan stepped out, his blue skin luminous under the station lights. He wore an even more elaborate suit than before, this one deep navy with silver patterns that seemed to shift and move like constellations. Behind him followed a retinue of assistants and security personnel. The Proximan officer's grip on Max's shoulder loosened slightly as he straightened to attention. Eridan's entourage moved with purpose through the now silent hub. Travelers and staff alike pressed themselves against walls to make way. The counselor's eyes, those strange, pupilless orbs, scanned the crowd until they found Max. "Release that child immediately," Eridan commanded, his melodious voice carrying easily across the space. The security officer's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Sir, this human is suspected of—" "This human," Eridan interrupted, "is my honored guest. Any accusation against him is an accusation against the Cerulean Diplomatic Corps and, by extension, the Cerulean hegemony." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. The Cerulean hegemony controlled access to 3 of the most resource-rich systems in this sector. Even the Proximan security force wouldn't risk offending them. The officer's hand dropped from Max's shoulder as if burned. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding, Counselor." "Indeed." Eridan approached until he stood directly before Max. Up close, the alien skin had a subtle pattern, almost like fingerprints, but more complex, swirling across his features. "Are you well, Max?" Max swallowed hard, acutely aware of hundreds of alien eyes watching this exchange. "I'm fine, sir." Eridan nodded, then he addressed the security officer without looking at him. "I trust this misunderstanding will not appear in any official records?" "Of course not, Counselor," the officer replied, backing away. Eridan turned to Max again, his expression softening. 3 days ago, you offered me kindness when others showed contempt. You gave everything you had to help a stranger. He extended a long-fingered hand. I promised I would not forget. A cerulean's word is his bond. Max stared at the offered hand, then at the luxurious vehicles waiting outside, then back at Eridan. What are you saying? I'm offering you a choice, young human. Continue your current path or accept my hospitality and protection. Education, shelter, opportunity, these can be yours. The transit hub had gone completely silent. Even the automated announcements seemed to have paused to witness this moment. Why would you help me? Max asked, his voice small. Eridan's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Because kindness deserves kindness. Because potential should not be wasted. Because I see in you something rare in this galaxy. Compassion without expectation of reward. Max looked around at the faces watching him. Some curious, some envious, some outright hostile. This was the only life he'd known since his parents died in the colony riots 3 years ago. Could he really leave it behind? I don't know anything about diplomacy or... You know more than you think, Eridan interrupted gently. You navigated a complex social situation with grace. You made a moral choice when an easier path was available. These are the foundations of diplomacy. Max took a deep breath and reached out, placing his small hand in Eridan's larger one. Okay, I'll come with you. As Eridan led him toward the waiting vehicles, Max couldn't help but notice the expressions on the faces they passed, particularly the security officer who had been so quick to accuse him moments before. For the first time in years, Max walked with his head held high. The diplomatic compound of the cerulean hegemony rose like a sapphire mountain from the outskirts of Harmony City. As the motorcade passed through security gates that could have stopped a battlecruiser, Max pressed his face against the transport's window, mouth slightly agape. This is where you live? He asked, unable to hide his amazement. Eridan chuckled, the sound like water flowing over smooth stones. This is where we live now, young Max. The vehicle glided to a stop before an entrance flanked by towering statues of what Max assumed were cerulean historical figures. Their elongated forms twisted upward in graceful spirals, capturing light and reflecting it in hypnotic patterns. Come, Eridan said, extending his hand as the door slid open. Let me introduce you to your new home. Max stepped out, suddenly conscious of his filthy clothes and unwashed state. A line of staff members stood at attention, some cerulean, others from various species Max had seen around the city. Their uniforms matched the compound's aesthetic. Deep blues with silver accents that seemed to catch light from impossible angles. Counselor Eridan, welcome back, said a cerulean male who stepped forward. Unlike Eridan's warm demeanor, this alien's face remained carefully neutral, his posture rigid. I see you've brought a guest. Not a guest, Talek. A new member of our household. Eridan placed a gentle hand on Max's shoulder. This is Max, a young human who showed me exceptional kindness. Max, this is Talek, my chief of staff. Talek's eyes, darker blue than Eridan's, flicked over Max with barely concealed disdain. How charitable of you, counselor. I'll have the servants prepare appropriate quarters in the auxiliary wing. The east wing, Eridan corrected firmly. Near my own chambers. A flicker of something, surprise, anger, crossed Talek's face before his professional mask returned. As you wish, counselor. Though I must remind you of the security protocols, especially given the recent incidents. Max glanced between them, sensing the tension. What incidents? Eridan waved a dismissive hand. Nothing for you to worry about. Some minor security concerns that Talek, in his thoroughness, is addressing. Minor? Talek's voice took on an edge. 3 breaches in our communication systems, classified documents accessed without authorization, and you call this minor. Perhaps we could discuss this in private, Eridan suggested, his melodious voice maintaining its pleasant tone, despite the clear warning beneath. Talek bowed stiffly. Of course, counselor. I've prepared the daily briefing in your study. His eyes flicked to Max again. I assume the human will need to be processed, medical examination, Decontamination? Appropriate attire? Max bristled at being discussed as though he weren't present, but Eridan nodded. Yes, though, with dignity and respect, Talek. Remember that Max is here at my personal invitation. Understood. Talek snapped his fingers, and two female staff members stepped forward, one cerulean and one Medusa. Linara, Flotia, please see to our new residents' needs. As Eridan departed with Talek, Max found himself being gently but firmly guided toward another wing of the compound. The cerulean female, Linara, smiled warmly at him. Don't mind Talek, she whispered. He's protective of the counselor, that's all. More like protective of his position, added Flotia, her translucent form rippling with amusement. He's been angling to become Eridan's successor for decades. Max looked back over his shoulder at Eridan's retreating form. Is the counselor really important? Both females exchanged glances that suggested Max had asked if water was wet. Counselor Eridan is one of the 7 high diplomats of the cerulean hegemony, Linara explained. His decisions affect billions of lives across 3 star systems. And he's currently negotiating a historic trade agreement with the Terran Alliance, added Flotia, the first major human-cerulean collaboration since the Resource Wars. Max's eyes widened. With humans? But I thought that humans were still in the diplomatic doghouse? Flotia finished, her form rippling with what might have been a chuckle. They were, but your species has a remarkable talent for making themselves useful. The new Terran Chancellor has been pushing for reconciliation. They led Max through corridors that seemed designed to overwhelm. Soaring ceilings, artwork that defied physics, and views of gardens where plants from a dozen worlds grew in harmonious arrangements. Finally, they reached a suite of rooms that would have housed Max's entire former neighborhood of street kids. These will be your quarters, Linara said, gesturing to the space. Bedroom, study, refreshment area, and sanitation facilities. Max approached a wall that appeared to be a window overlooking the city, but discovered it was actually a screen displaying the view. Can I see different places? Of course. Linara touched a panel, and the view shifted to what appeared to be an alien ocean, then a mountain range, then deep space. As Max marveled at the technology, a soft chime sounded. Flotia glided to a panel near the door. Security alert, she said, her tone suddenly serious. Another breach in the communications hub. Linara frowned. That's the 4th this week. She turned to Max. We need to report this. Will you be comfortable beginning your decontamination process? The sanitation chamber is fully automated. Max nodded, still distracted by the changing views on the wall screen. After the staff members departed, he explored his new quarters, finding drawers filled with clothing in approximately his size and food dispensers offering more options than he'd seen in years. As he was examining a strange fruit from the refreshment area, the door chimed. Expecting Linara or Flotia, Max called out, "Come in!" Instead, Talek entered, his tall form seeming to fill the doorway. Without the presence of Eridan, his expression had hardened into open hostility. "Human," he said, the word itself sounding like an accusation. "How convenient that you appear just as our security systems experience unprecedented breaches." Max took an instinctive step backward. "I don't know anything about that." "Perhaps not consciously," Talek replied, advancing into the room. "But humans have a history of being useful tools for those with larger ambitions." "I'm not a tool," Max protested. "I just helped someone who needed it." Talek's mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a human, but on his face looked predatory. "We shall see. The counselor may be blinded by sentiment, but I am not. One wrong move, human, and you'll find yourself back on the streets if you're fortunate." With that, he turned and left, the door sliding shut behind him with a finality that made Max shiver despite the comfortable temperature of the room. After 3 days in the cerulean compound, Max had established a routine. Mornings began with breakfast delivered by service drones, followed by tutoring sessions with an AI program that assessed his education level, dismally low in mathematics, surprisingly high in languages and practical engineering. Afternoons were his own, though he wasn't permitted to leave the compound without an escort. Today, however, Max had a mission: Talik's accusation had been gnawing at him, and he was determined to prove his innocence. If someone was causing security breaches, he needed to find out who before he became the perfect scapegoat. Years on the street had taught Max how to move unnoticed. He'd spent his free time memorizing the compound's layout, noting the positions of security cameras and guard rotations. The staff largely ignored him, assuming he was where he was supposed to be. Only Talik watched him with those cold, suspicious eyes whenever their paths crossed. Max slipped into a service corridor he'd discovered yesterday, a narrow passage used by maintenance drones. The compound's security focused on external threats. No one expected infiltration from within. As he navigated the passage, Max noticed something odd, a small device attached to the wall near a junction box. It wasn't cerulean design. Their technology favored smooth curves and bioluminescent indicators. This was angular with a pulsing red light barely visible through its casing. Max's street instincts kicked in. He didn't touch it but memorized its location and continued exploring. Within 20 minutes, he'd found 3 more identical devices, all positioned near communication nodes or security terminals. Rounding a corner, Max froze as voices echoed from an intersecting corridor. He pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. "Must accelerate the timeline," came Talik's unmistakable voice. "The human delegation arrives tomorrow." "The system isn't fully compromised," replied a second voice, deeper, raspier. "We need another day at minimum." "Unacceptable. The trade agreement cannot proceed. If these negotiations succeed, the Terrans gain legitimacy they don't deserve." Max's heart pounded. He risked a peek around the corner and saw Talik speaking with a hulking figure whose species he didn't recognize, gray-skinned with ridged protrusions along its skull. "The devices are in place," the gray alien said. "Once activated, they'll corrupt all communication systems and security protocols. The compound will be vulnerable for approximately 7 minutes. Sufficient time for our associates to access the vault and retrieve the authentication codes," Talik replied. "And with the human boy as our scapegoat, suspicion will fall on the Terran delegation." Max pulled back, mind racing. He needed to warn Eridan, but who would believe a street kid over the chief of staff? He needed evidence. A maintenance drone whirred past, startling him. Max watched it disappear down the corridor, then had an idea. The drones recorded everything from maintenance logs. If he could access one, Max backtracked to his quarters, heart hammering in his chest. He needed to think. The human delegation was arriving tomorrow for the trade negotiations. Talik was planning to sabotage the compound security, steal something called authentication codes, and blame it all on humans, with Max as the perfect fall guy. He paced his room, mind racing. Then he noticed something, a tiny glint in the corner of his ceiling. Moving closer, he spotted a device similar to those in the service corridors, but smaller. Someone was watching him. A chime at his door made him jump. "Enter," he called, trying to sound casual. Eridan glided in, his formal robes shimmering with embedded lights that seemed to respond to his movements. "Max, my young friend, I've come with an invitation." Max forced a smile, acutely aware of the surveillance device above them. "An invitation, counselor?" "Indeed. The Terran delegation arrives tomorrow for our historic negotiations. I'd like you to attend the welcome banquet as my special advisor on human culture." "Me?" Max couldn't hide his surprise. "But I don't know anything about diplomacy." Eridan's expression softened. "You understand human resilience, adaptability, and compassion, qualities that impressed me deeply. Besides," he added with a gesture that Max had learned was the cerulean equivalent of a wink, "your presence will remind both sides what we're working toward, a future where even the most vulnerable can thrive." Max glanced nervously at the ceiling. "Counselor, could we talk somewhere else? Maybe the gardens?" Eridan tilted his head curiously but nodded. "Of course." Once outside among the exotic flora of the compound's central garden, Max felt safer. Surveillance would be harder here among the dense foliage and flowing water features. "Counselor, I need to tell you something important," Max began, keeping his voice low. "I think Talik is planning to sabotage the negotiations." Eridan's expression didn't change, but the patterns on his skin shifted slightly. A cerulean indication of concern, Max had learned. That's a serious accusation, Max. What evidence do you have? Max described the devices he'd found and the conversation he'd overheard. There's also something watching me in my room. I think Talek is setting me up to take the blame. Aridin was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on a fountain where water flowed upward instead of down. I've known Talek for 40 years, he finally said. He's ambitious, yes, and he holds traditional views about humans. But sabotage? That would dishonor the hegemony itself. I know what I heard, Max insisted. They're planning to steal authentication codes from something called the Vault. That got Aridin's attention. His skin patterns shifted dramatically. The authentication codes are essential for validating any treaty. Without them, no agreement can be formally recognized by the hegemony. You have to believe me, Max pleaded. Aridin studied him with those pupilless eyes. I do believe you heard something concerning, but accusations without proof could be disastrous, especially with the delegations arriving tomorrow. He placed a hand on Max's shoulder. Attend the banquet. Keep your eyes open. If Talek is plotting something, we'll need irrefutable evidence. Max nodded, though disappointment churned in his stomach. He'd hoped for immediate action, not more waiting. In the meantime, Aridin added, I'll have my personal security team sweep your quarters. If there's unauthorized surveillance, we'll find it, discreetly. As they walked back toward the compound, Max felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Aridin hadn't dismissed his concerns outright, but neither had he acted with the urgency Max felt was needed. Tomorrow would bring the human delegation, and whatever Talek had planned, Max would need to be ready. Max tugged uncomfortably at the collar of his formal attire, a miniature version of cerulean diplomatic dress, tailored specifically for him. The deep blue fabric with silver accents felt alien against his skin, a far cry from the tattered clothes he'd worn just days ago. Stop fidgeting, Lenara whispered, adjusting his collar. You look like a proper diplomat's aide now. The grand reception hall of the compound glittered with bioluminescent decorations that pulsed in harmony with the subtle music emanating from hidden speakers. Dignitaries from a dozen worlds mingled, their varied physiologies creating a living mosaic of galactic diversity. There are so many humans, Max marveled, spotting the Terran delegation across the room. Their formal uniforms, navy blue with gold trim, stood out among the more exotic attire of the other species. Aridin appeared at Max's side, resplendent in ceremonial robes that seemed to capture and amplify light. Come, young Max, I'd like to introduce you to our Terran guests. As they approached the human delegation, Max noticed Talek hovering nearby, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes never leaving Max. The security team had indeed found and removed the surveillance device from Max's quarters, but as Max had feared, Aridin reported it was of Terran manufacture, a detail that had only deepened the counselor's skepticism about Talek's involvement. Ambassador Pearson, Aridin greeted the leader of the human delegation, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair. May I present Max, my human cultural advisor. The ambassador smiled warmly at Max. A pleasure to meet you, young man. I didn't realize the Ceruleans had human staff members. Max is a special case, Aridin explained, recounting their first meeting at the transit hub. As the adults conversed, Max's attention drifted to a junior member of the human delegation, a young woman with familiar features that made his heart skip. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw. She caught him staring and approached, curiosity evident in her expression. Hello there, I'm Sarah Pearson, the ambassador's assistant. Max couldn't speak. The last time he'd seen his sister, she'd been 15, being evacuated with other human dependents during the colony riots. He'd been separated in the chaos, presumed dead in the aftermath. Sarah, he finally managed, his voice barely audible. Her professional smile faltered. She leaned closer, studying his face. Max? Maxwell? Her voice rose in disbelief. It can't be. You know each other? Ambassador Pearson asked, noticing their exchange. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Ambassador, this is my brother. My little brother who we thought died in the Harmony Colony riots 3 years ago. The reunion might have been a touching diplomatic moment, but Max's attention was suddenly diverted by movement near the service entrance. The gray-skinned alien he'd seen with Talek was dressed as catering staff, slipping something into a service panel. Max's mind raced. The plot was unfolding now, not tomorrow as he'd overheard. He had seconds to decide: stay for this miraculous reunion with his sister or stop the sabotage. "Sarah," he said urgently, "I found you once, I'll find you again. Right now, everyone here is in danger." Before anyone could react, Max bolted toward the service entrance, ignoring Eridan's startled call. He reached the panel just as the gray-skinned alien disappeared through a staff door. The device was already blinking rapidly. "Activated. Security breach imminent," announced an automated voice throughout the hall. The elegant lighting flickered, then dimmed to emergency levels. Chaos erupted as security personnel rushed to protect their respective dignitaries. Max heard Eridan calling for calm, but his voice was lost in the confusion. Max made a split-second decision. He knew where Talek would be heading, the vault with the authentication codes, and he knew a shortcut through the service corridors. As he raced through the now familiar maintenance passages, Max heard footsteps behind him. He ducked into an alcove, expecting to see one of Talek's accomplices. Instead, Lenara appeared, her ceremonial staff uniform disheveled. "Max, what's happening?" she demanded. "Talek's sabotaging the security systems to steal the authentication codes," Max explained breathlessly. "He's going to blame it on humans, on me." Lenara's expression hardened. "I knew something was wrong. Talek's been acting strangely for weeks. The vault's this way. Follow me." They sprinted through the corridors, Lenara leading them through shortcuts Max hadn't discovered. As they ran, they encountered a maintenance worker, a stocky Arcturian who looked startled to see them. "The compound's in lockdown," the Arcturian said. "You should return to the secure areas." "Talek is heading for the vault," Lenara explained. "We need to stop him." The Arcturian's four eyes widened. "I knew it. The chief of staff has been accessing restricted areas at odd hours. I reported it, but security said I was imagining things." "Help us," Max pleaded. "We need to reach the vault before he does." The Arcturian nodded firmly. "This way. There's a maintenance lift that bypasses the security checkpoints." The unlikely trio raced through the compound's hidden infrastructure. Max realized that while Talek might have the compound's official security under his control, he'd overlooked the maintenance staff, the invisible workers who kept everything running. They emerged near the vault level just in time to see Talek and his gray-skinned accomplice approaching the massive door that protected the hegemony's most valuable assets. "The systems are compromised," the gray alien was saying. "We have approximately 5 minutes before security protocols reset." "More than enough time," Talek replied, placing his palm against the scanner. The vault door began to slide open. "Stop!" Max shouted, stepping forward with Lenara and the Arcturian behind him. Talek spun around, his expression shifting from shock to calculated calm. "The human child," he said coolly. "How convenient. When security discovers you here, attempting to steal the authentication codes on behalf of the Terran delegation, the negotiations will collapse." "Nobody will believe that," Max retorted, "especially since we're recording everything you say." He gestured to the maintenance drone hovering near the Arcturian, the same type of drone he'd noticed earlier, its recording light now blinking steadily. Talek's composure cracked. "Deactivate that drone immediately." The gray alien pulled out a weapon, a neural disruptor, illegal in most civilized systems. "I'll handle this," he growled. Before he could fire, a voice rang out from behind them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Max turned to see Eridan approaching, flanked by security personnel, and Sarah. The counselor's normally gentle expression had hardened into something ancient and formidable. "Counselor," Talek began, "I can explain." "Save your explanations for the tribunal," Eridan interrupted. "We've been monitoring your communications since Max warned me of his suspicions. I needed evidence before acting against my chief of staff of 40 years. The security team moved forward, disarming and restraining Talek and his accomplice. As they were led away, Eridan approached Max, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Once again, your compassion has proven invaluable," he said softly. "First to me at the transit hub, and now to the entire hegemony." Max shook his head. "I just didn't want to be blamed for something I didn't do." A natural human response, Sarah said, stepping forward with a proud smile. We're survivors, Max. Always have been. As the emergency lighting returned to normal and the compound systems reset, Max found himself at the center of attention, the homeless human boy who had saved a historic peace negotiation and in the process found the family he thought he'd lost forever. The week following Talik's arrest passed in a whirlwind of debriefings, ceremonies, and tearful conversations with Sarah. The trade negotiations proceeded with renewed vigor, both sides seemingly eager to prove that the actions of a few extremists couldn't derail the path toward cooperation. Max sat in Eridan's private garden, watching the strange flora respond to the artificial breeze. The counselor had given him this quiet space to think about the decision that now loomed before him. Mind if I join you? Sarah asked, approaching with 2 cups of steaming liquid. It's hot chocolate, real earth chocolate. The ambassador had some in his personal stores. Max accepted the cup gratefully. The rich aroma transported him back to fragments of memory, their mother making hot chocolate on cold colony nights before everything fell apart. Have you decided? Sarah asked gently, sitting beside him on the sculpted bench. Max sipped the chocolate, buying time. I don't know. Going back to Earth with you means family, human culture, a chance to be normal again, but staying here with Eridan. He gestured at the alien beauty surrounding them. He's offering me a position as his official human cultural liaison. I could help shape how ceruleans and humans understand each other. Sarah smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. A gesture so familiar it made Max's chest ache. There's no wrong choice, Max. Either way, we found each other again. I'm not losing you a second time. The tribunal revealed some disturbing information, Max said, changing the subject. Talik wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger group called the Purity Consortium. Sarah nodded grimly. We've been briefed. They're a multi-species organization dedicated to keeping the galactic community segregated. Humans are just their latest target. Because we're newcomers. Because we adapt so quickly, Sarah corrected. Most species take centuries to integrate new technologies or cultural practices. Humans do it in generations, sometimes even years. It frightens them. Max thought about his own rapid adjustment to life in the compound. In just over a week, he'd gone from street urchin to key player in an interstellar diplomatic incident. Maybe there was something to that fear. A soft chime interrupted their conversation. Lenara appeared at the garden entrance, her formal staff uniform replaced by more practical attire. Counselor Eridan requests your presence in the main conference room, she announced. Both of you. Max and Sarah exchanged curious glances before following Lenara through the compound's gleaming corridors. Security had been visibly enhanced since the incident. More guards, more scanners, and a general atmosphere of heightened vigilance. The conference room doors slid open to reveal Eridan, Ambassador Pearson, and several high-ranking officials from both delegations gathered around a holographic display showing what appeared to be security footage. Ah, Max, Sarah, please join us, Eridan beckoned. We've uncovered something concerning. The hologram shifted to show a detention facility where Talik and his gray-skinned accomplice were being held. As they watched, the gray alien suddenly convulsed, foam bubbling from his mouth before collapsing. Suicide capsule, Ambassador Pearson explained grimly. Embedded in a false tooth. Activated remotely. By whom? Max asked. That's what concerns us, Eridan replied. The signal originated from within this compound. A chill ran down Max's spine. There are more conspirators here? We believe so, Eridan confirmed. The Purity Consortium appears to have deeper infiltration than we initially thought. They're determined to prevent this alliance at any cost. Ambassador Pearson stepped forward. Which brings us to a difficult request. He looked directly at Max. We need your help, son. My help? How? You've become a symbol, the ambassador explained. The human child who gave his last coins to help an alien in need, then saved the negotiations through quick thinking and courage. The story is spreading throughout the colony and beyond. The consortium sees you as a threat to their narrative, Eridan added. They thrive on promoting fear and distrust between species. Your story contradicts everything they stand for. Sarah placed a protective hand on Max's shoulder. You're not suggesting using my brother as bait? Not bait, Eridan assured her, but we would like him to participate in the public signing ceremony tomorrow. His presence would be powerful symbolism. And a target, Sarah objected. He would have the highest level of protection, Ambassador Pearson promised. But we can't force this. It must be his choice. All eyes turned to Max. He felt the weight of their expectations, human and alien alike, pressing down on him. Just days ago, his biggest concern had been finding his next meal. Now somehow he had become a pivotal figure in interstellar diplomacy. If I do this, Max said slowly, I want something in return. Eridan's skin patterns shifted in surprise. Name it. I want a cultural exchange program, not just for diplomats and scientists, but for ordinary people, especially kids. Humans living with cerulean families, ceruleans living with humans. Real understanding doesn't come from treaties. It comes from sharing meals and homes in everyday life. The room fell silent. Then Ambassador Pearson began to laugh. A warm, genuine sound. By God, the boy's a natural diplomat after all. Eridan's skin glowed with what Max had learned was the cerulean expression of approval. An excellent proposal. We can announce it at the signing ceremony. Then I'll do it, Max decided. But I want Sarah beside me. His sister squeezed his shoulder. Always. As the meeting concluded and the officials dispersed to make preparations, Eridan held Max back for a private word. Have you made your decision about staying or returning to Earth? The counselor asked. Max looked at Sarah, deep in conversation with Ambassador Pearson across the room. I think I have. But first, we need to get through tomorrow. Eridan nodded sagely. Indeed. Our security teams are preparing for every contingency, but the consortium has proven resourceful. Stay vigilant, young Max. As Max left the conference room with Sarah, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Purity Consortium wouldn't give up so easily. Tomorrow's ceremony would be more than symbolic. It would be a declaration of a new era in human-alien relations. And somehow, improbably, a homeless boy who had once given away his last few coins would be standing at the center of it all. The Grand Plaza of Harmony City had been transformed for the signing ceremony. Floating platforms held dignitaries from 24 worlds, while massive screens projected the proceedings for the thousands gathered below. Security was omnipresent but discreet, a careful balance between protection and openness. Max stood at the edge of the main platform, tugging at his formal attire. This suit was even more elaborate than the one he'd worn to the banquet, with intricate silver patterns that mimicked the style of Eridan's ceremonial robes. Sarah stood beside him in her Terran diplomatic uniform, a reassuring presence amid the overwhelming spectacle. Nervous? She asked, straightening his collar. Terrified, Max admitted. What if I trip and fall off the platform? Sarah laughed. Then you'd make a spectacular entrance to galactic politics. Seriously, though, you'll be fine. Just be yourself, the kid brave enough to give away his last coins to help someone in need. Max scanned the crowd below, a habit from his street days. Something about the gathering made his instincts prickle. Do you see that group near the Eastern Fountain? They're not watching the ceremony like everyone else. Sarah followed his gaze to a cluster of mixed species, a Proximan, 2 Arcturians, and a Galician, all seemingly engaged in casual conversation, while their eyes darted periodically to the security perimeter. Good eye, Sarah murmured, subtly activating her communication implant. Security team, possible hostiles at the Eastern Fountain, mixed species group, 4 individuals, behaving suspiciously. As security personnel began moving discreetly toward the location, Ambassador Pearson approached them. It's time. The authentication codes have been verified and the treaty is ready for final signatures. They joined Eridan at the center of the platform, where a holographic display showed the treaty document rotating slowly above an ornate table. The counselor's skin was glowing with an intensity Max had never seen before, the cerulean equivalent of barely contained excitement. Today marks a new chapter in our shared history, Eridan began, his voice amplified across the plaza. A chapter of cooperation rather than competition, of understanding rather than fear. As Eridan spoke, Max noticed movement from the suspicious group. They had separated, taking positions at different points around the plaza. One of them, the Proximan, was removing something from beneath his cloak. "Sarah," Max whispered urgently, "they're making their move." Before Sarah could respond, a series of small explosions erupted around the plaza's perimeter. Not deadly blasts, but diversionary devices creating smoke and confusion. Security forces rushed toward the disturbances, leaving gaps in their coverage. The Proximan raised what appeared to be a projectile weapon, aiming directly at the platform where Eridan stood mid-speech. Without hesitation, Max lunged forward. "Eridan, get down!" His warning came just as the weapon discharged. Eridan dropped to the platform floor, the projectile missing him by inches and embedding itself in the ceremonial backdrop. The crowd erupted in panic as security forces converged on the attackers. In the chaos, Max spotted another threat. The Galaxian from the suspicious group was scaling the support structure of the platform, a vibroblade clutched in its mandibles. "There," Max shouted, pointing, "on the support beam." Sarah reacted instantly, drawing a small stunner from her uniform and firing with remarkable precision. The Galaxian seized up, its muscles contracting from the electrical discharge, before falling into the waiting arms of security personnel below. The attempted assassination had failed, but the ceremony was in shambles. Dignitaries were being rushed to safety. The crowd was dispersing in panic, and the historic moment was dissolving into fear. Exactly what the Purity Consortium had wanted. Max looked at the scene unfolding around him and made a decision. He grabbed the microphone Eridan had dropped. "Wait!" His voice boomed across the plaza, startling everyone into momentary stillness. "Please don't leave! Don't let them win!" The crowd hesitated. Security had apprehended the attackers, but the damage to the ceremony's dignity seemed irreparable. "My name is Max," he continued, his voice steady. "A week ago, I was just a homeless human kid surviving on these streets. The only thing I owned were a few coins I'd saved for weeks. Then I met Counselor Eridan at a transit hub, though I didn't know who he was then. He was just someone who needed help, and I gave him everything I had." The plaza had grown quiet, thousands of beings, human and alien alike, listening to this unexpected speaker. "I didn't help him because he was cerulean or important. I helped because that's what humans do. We see someone in need, and something inside us says, that could be me. That could be someone I love. And we act." Max looked at Sarah, drawing strength from her encouraging nod. "The people who tried to disrupt this ceremony today want us to be afraid of each other. They want humans to see ceruleans as too alien to understand, and they want ceruleans to see humans as too unpredictable to trust, but they're wrong." Eridan had risen to his feet, standing beside Max with a hand on his shoulder. "I've lived on both sides now," Max continued. "I've been the human boy that aliens ignored on the street, and I've been welcomed into a cerulean home as family. And you know what I've learned? We're not that different. We all want safety. We all want belonging. We all want to be seen." The crowd had begun to return, drawn by the unexpected eloquence of this child. "So I'm asking you, all of you, to stay. Watch this treaty being signed, not because it's about trade routes or resource rights, but because it's about recognizing that we're stronger together than we are apart." Ambassador Pearson stepped forward, visibly moved. "The boy speaks wisdom beyond his years. Shall we proceed, Counselor Eridan?" Eridan's skin glowed with approval. "Indeed. And I believe Max should be the first to sign as a witness." The ceremony resumed with renewed purpose. As Max signed his name to the historic document, his first time ever signing anything official, he felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him or Eridan or even the treaty. It was about the power of a simple act of kindness to change the course of history. 5 years later, Max stood at the same transit hub where his journey had begun. At 17, he'd grown taller, his once gaunt face filled out, his eyes still carrying that same determination, but now tempered with wisdom beyond his years. He divided his time between Earth and the cerulean hegemony, serving as the director of the Cultural Exchange Initiative he'd proposed, a program that had now placed over 10,000 children in cross-species homes. Today, he was here to meet the newest group of human children arriving to live with cerulean families. As the transit pod docked, Max smiled at the memory of a blue-skinned alien struggling to convince a transit officer of his identity. "Excuse me," said a small voice. Max looked down to see a cerulean child, no more than 8 years old, holding out a transit pass. "I seem to have the wrong documentation. Could you help me?" Max knelt to the child's level. "Of course. What's your name?" "Maxim," the child replied. "My human host family named me after you." Max felt a surge of emotion as he helped the child sort out the transit confusion. As they waited for the proper documentation to arrive, Maxim asked, "Is it true you gave your last coins to Counselor Eridan when you were homeless?" "It is," Max confirmed. "Why?" the child asked with characteristic cerulean directness. Max considered the question, thinking of all that had followed from that simple act: finding Sarah, stopping Talik's conspiracy, the treaty, the exchange program, and countless lives changed, including his own. "Because kindness matters," he said finally. "Sometimes it's all that matters." As the new group of exchange students emerged from the transit pod, Max stood to greet them, Maxim's small blue hand held trustingly in his. The homeless human boy who had once paid a stranger's bus fare now welcomed a new generation into a universe where such acts of compassion weren't just valued. They were changing the course of galactic history, and it had all begun with a handful of coins and the simple human instinct to help someone in need.